Welcome to the first episode of The Burning Bench. And before we get into this week's episode, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a goldsmith for almost 42 years. And in that time, I've learned an awful lot. Broke a few stones, burned a few shanks. But if you go to this trade with the attitude of, I break it, I can fix it, you'll be just fine. And that's been my philosophy since I started, and there has been very, very little that I haven't been able to fix. So I've been very fortunate in that respect. My purpose in shooting these is to give you an idea of what it takes to make and repair jewelry. And there's a lot, but it's very repetitious. So once you get the basic down and just practice, you'll be able to become very proficient in relatively short period of time, depending upon how much work you're able to get and do. Personally, I started with silver. It's affordable and it's very good for fabrication skills. The technique's a little bit different than gold, and we'll go into that in future episodes. But right now, this first episode, what I'd like to do is tell you and show you about bench setup and also shop setup. One of the things that's very important in having a good shop is a steamer. My steamer is pretty good size, but I do a lot of work. There's steamers in all kinds of different price ranges. Steam Dragon is a good steamer, and it's as you need it, which means is it just feeds into a bucket of distilled water or a bottle of distilled water, and it makes steam as you need it. When you push on the pedal, the steam goes through the water goes through a heating chamber, and you get instant steam. And if you're only doing a few projects here and there, it works really, really well. I need a plater because all my white gold I rhodium plate. White gold is, you're taking a yellow material and adding alloys to make it white. And it's not a real true white. So rhodium is a very white metal. And so we rhodium plate all our white gold and give it that really nice white look. An ultrasonic, of course, is mandatory. If you try to work on a piece of jewelry that's not clean, it's going to have disastrous results that may be irreversible, depending upon how the stones are set. Sometimes you have to pull stones to get the dirt out from underneath of them. Pickle Pot is important. When you work on a piece of jewelry, sometimes you get fire scale and you need to put in a pickle pot, which I just use a crock pot, and it heats to low temperature, and you use Spirex number 2, and that will eliminate the fire scale that's on the piece and make it easier to polish. Now, you can buy sizing stock, but it's so important to have a rolling mill. You never know when you need a roll. You may not have exactly the right sizing stock. So sometimes we have to pour gold into an ingot mold and then roll it out in the size we need it. Ring stretcher / reducer. If you do a lot of repair work, it's mandatory. Next, we have our buffer. You can get a buffer in a lot of different price ranges. The one I use is cost-wise for the home studio, may be pretty cost prohibitive. But I would at least suggest a decent desktop buffer or tabletop buffer. And you can get them at your jewelry supply houses. Next, we're going to move on to the workbench. One thing that's really important to realize and know about a workbench is that it's just as important of a tool as any other hand tool or moto tool you use to make and repair jewelry. This particular bench is just a great design. I've tried a lot of different styles of benches, but for me, this one works out best. A standard bench comes, I think, in 36 or 38 inches. I raised this one up to 41 inches. Very important to work as straight as possible. Not having to lean your head down like this is really good for the back of your neck. And if you're someone like me that spends anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day on a bench, very important to keep straight. This particular bench has 2 working drawers and 3 storage drawers, and the all-important tray. First, we'll talk about the lap pan. Now, the lap pan is just what the name implies. It goes over the lap, and it catches filings you may create while you're working on a piece of jewelry, and hopefully, if you drop anything, it'll end up in the lap pan and not on the floor. However, you will spend a good portion of time on the floor looking for something. It's inevitable. I know I have. The next drawer is where I like to put my tools, hand tools. As you can see, I've got my ring mandrels here, which I use 2 of them. This one, very rarely, sometimes you have a baby ring that you need to size down, and it goes below size 1. And then you have our standard ring mandrel. I have my hammers, a chasing hammer, and then my rawhide mallet. Most of our hand tools you need to get from a jewelry supply house. There are hand tools that are just for our industry. One of those would be our shank pliers. Shank pliers are pliers that we use to close a shank, and yet this nylon allows us to not mar the surface of the ring, or we can even close it. Say if a ring has stones down the side of it and we're closing it, we can actually put this nylon on the stone itself and close, because you have to get up the shank if it's going down a lot to get a nice bend on it, so it stays round once you put it back on the mandrel. And nothing's worse than to give a customer a ring and it's all oval and weird shape. We have digital calipers, and the nice thing about a digital caliper is that they're so affordable these days. Just about any place that sells tools will have them, and they should be under 20 bucks. When we're working on a piece of jewelry and we've trimmed it up with a file, we still have to take it down farther. We have to smooth that finish out, so when we take it to the buffer, we can get a nice even polish on it. And what I do to do that is I use these emery boards. You can get these at any department store that has a nail supply section or nail care section. This is 2-sided. It has a coarse side and a smoother side. And I'll start off with the coarse side and go to the smoother side. And then I always have a worn out one to where I can even get it finer. So the finer you get it when you take it to the buffer, the easier it is to polish and the better polish you're going to get on it. Next, I have my files. I use 2 main files. Now, there's a lot of different attachments you can get for your flex shaft that are small sanding disc, and I just don't feel I have the control. There's something about, for me anyway, being able to file on a piece of jewelry, kind of connect with that piece of jewelry. It's hard to describe, but it's probably in my own head, but that's okay. It works for me. That's the important thing about this trade, is what I do and what you find for yourself that is easier for you, then that's right. There's no wrong or right. As long as the piece of jewelry comes out and looks good, then it was the right way to do it. These are my 2 main files. 6-inch, regular half round, number 2 cut, and a 7-inch Boric needle file, number 2 cut. I can do practically everything with these 2 files. You need these dividers, and there's so much you can do with these. If I'm fabricating something and I need to make a couple pieces the exact same size, I use these. My main use for them is for when I size a ring down. And in the next episode, we're going to be sizing a ring down. You'll see exactly what I mean and how to use these. Next, we have our solder pick. And it is just what the name implies. You heat your solder, it balls up, and then it'll stick to the tip of this, and you move it to your piece of jewelry that you're working on. And there'll be more clarity on that when we go to the next episode and we size the ring down. You'll see exactly how to use it. Next, the all-important stainless steel soldering tweezers. We have one with a curved tip, then we have one with a straight tip. They can be interchangeable as far as uses go. Sometimes the curved tip is a lot easier, like if you're soldering a head in, you can take and actually take the head and then go straight down with it. But it's, there again, it comes down to what's comfortable for you. This is my solder pad, and you can see the burn marks. I have it set up in a specific way. Yellow, easy. Yellow, hard. Silver solder. White, hard. And white, easy. Do not cross-contaminate your solders. Nothing's worse than having to recut a ring and have to resolder it because you've got the wrong solder in there. This is boric acid powder. Your boric acid powder is a solution of boric acid and denatured alcohol. And what that is used for, when you work on a ring and heat the metal, you can get fire scale if it gets too hot. What this does is you put your ring in, and the denatured alcohol acts as a carrier. And then you burn your denatured alcohol off, and it leaves a film of boric acid powder on your ring and helps prevent that fire scale. Next we have Flux. Flux is very important in the soldering process. It helps keep the joint clean and hopefully prevents pit marks, or at least an aid in preventing pit marks. There are other issues that cause pit marks, which we will go into in future episodes. As I said, this is liquid. There is also a paste flux, but I prefer the liquid. Next, I like to talk about my tray. Maybe we shouldn't talk about my tray. Okay, we can talk about my tray now. It had stage fright. It happens. I probably use this tray, feels like 100 times a day. Has a lot of varied uses. Putting stones on that you're going to be setting into a piece of jewelry. Another use is just taking and putting your solder pad there. If I'm doing a chain solder, and I like to lay it down on my solder pad, and it gets it really close so I can see it well. Next, we have our torch. It's a mini torch or jeweler's torch, and you can purchase them at any jewelry supply or welding supply house. Generally, it comes with 5 tips. What I do is, the larger the hole, the hotter the flame. On silver, you need a hotter flame because it disperses heat differently than gold. Gold, you need the smaller tips, or the lower temperature flame. And if I'm melting gold or silver to make sizing stock, I use this rosebud tip. It creates a much hotter flame for melting large quantities of metal. This is beeswax. Beeswax is very important. It acts as a lubricant on my drills and on my burrs. Keeps them cool and keeps them from wearing out as fast. I also keep a chunk of beeswax around to pick stones up with. Your smaller stones, your half pointers, quarter pointers, 1 pointers, 5 pointers. A lot easier to pick them up with this, and then put them in the mounting where you want to set them. We have our bench pin, and you'll see how I use that in upcoming episodes. Then we have our third hand. I probably do 98% of my soldering in my third hand, and it's very nice because it's position this wherever I want to for the best view of whatever I'm working on. A few years ago, the jewelry industry came up with a mount and microscope for the Workbench. Really, really a great idea. However, the cost of their microscope was $1,800, $2,000. I went to eBay and found this boom microscope for $378, I think. All I had to do was modify the mount so I could mount it to my Workbench, and it's amazing. It is just amazing. You can see every little minute bend if you're bending prongs to set a stone, or every little bend if you're pounding on a bezel, and it really helps keep down the amount of loss through stone breakage. Well, that just about does it for the first episode of The Burning Bench. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at logan1studio@aol.com. Next episode, ring sizing. We're going to size a ring down. Till then, this is Willie. Thanks for tuning in.